Hallo en welkom bij mijn kanaal. Mijn naam is Darren. In dit jaar, 2024, leer ik Nederlands. As I said in a previous video, the reason for this channel is to document my processes and progress of Dutch study this year. So why Dutch? Why now? And why document the process in the first place? The inspiration comes from my recent language learning adventures. Some might call it language learning obsession. I think I've always been interested in the idea of languages in general, but I never really put any real effort into learning a language until I moved to Brussels. I had studied Russian at university about 35 years ago, but as is so often the case, so common, without a way to apply the language or practice the language, I quickly forgot everything I had learned after I left university. Later on in my 30s, I studied French and Spanish. French mainly because I had an opportunity to work off and on in Paris, and Spanish, well, because I felt like it. I didn't have any real formal structure when I was studying those languages, so I didn't truly make a lot of progress. Learning French over the years and living in Brussels, which is an amazing multilingual, multicultural environment that's very inspiring for language learners, I have at times been inspired to kind of scratch the language learning itch, in particular with Russian, which is a language I was sort of felt guilty about losing after university. However, each time that I would sort of dabble in Russian or dabble in Spanish, it was just that. It was just dabbling. There was no real structure in mind. And surprise, surprise, I didn't make a lot of progress. One day in August of 2021, I was sitting and drinking some coffee, and the thought occurred to me that if I had done something weekly to engage with Russian, to continue learning Russian over the 35 years since I had left university, I would probably have a pretty decent level in the language by now. And with that thought came, for some reason, first time in my life, a major shift in the way I viewed language learning. And I decided right then and there to spend 2 years studying Russian daily. The idea being to develop a base from which I could communicate and continue to use the language and take it however long it takes to whatever level I could get to over the years. And the idea being to just never lose it, never stop engaging with the language. And almost immediately, as I began this 2-year intensive Russian self-study plan, I also had the idea of applying a similar concept to two other languages that have always interested me, at least since I've been in Brussels, one being Spanish and the other being Dutch. So that brings us to 2024 and this current project of learning Dutch this year. The inspiration to document this year of Dutch study comes from having discovered some incredible concrete methods of self-study for languages that have completely changed my understanding of what it means to learn a language, of how to learn a language. That suggests that I had an idea of how to learn a language before, which is simply not the case. My first year and a half of Russian was total chaos. There was no structure. The only good thing about it is that I did it every day, so I actually managed to make progress despite the lack of structure. I'm in no way an expert on language learning, far from it. But what I have come to understand and what I firmly believe is that the clearest path to learning a new language is not through necessarily endless grammar study, but rather through lots of comprehensible input. That is, input that is engaging and just at the outer limits of one's current understanding. Then it is important that this content that you're absorbing gets repeated often, multiple times, and in various ways, such as through reading, listening, reading aloud, writing, etc. I won't go into it, but if you look up comprehensible input and language acquisition, you can find loads of information on these ideas. So coming back to this channel and the reason for its existence, I see this as an opportunity to put these ideas to the test, so to speak, by starting in Dutch from almost zero and studying for 1 year in what for me will be an entirely new and very structured way. Having this channel as documentary evidence of this year will give me something to look back on that will be more substantial than just hazy memories and anecdotal evidence of my progress. In the next process-oriented video, I will talk a little bit about how I'm going about studying for the first 3 months of this year, and I'll also mention some of the very influential people whose ideas I'm using as the basis for my study this year. Thank you for watching this video. Please feel free to subscribe if you'd like to follow along as I continue on this Dutch learning journey. Hou je goed en tot ziens.